Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. And today we're going to be looking at a top 10 NCAA football. Just kidding. We're going to look at the top 10 NCAA football controversies of all time. I am rocking the Arkansas Razorback t-shirt. So obviously, this is a college themed top 10 because Arkansas does not have a major league team. So we're going to be looking at some NCAA football controversies and all that. So, yeah, there's a lot of things happening and all that. So, here we go. Number 10 is Baylor's sexual assault scandal. Baylor in the 2010s were decent. They had RG3 as in Robert Griffith III. They had, what was that wide receiver? Williams? I would say Josh Cribbs, but that's wrong. I can't remember. They had a good wide receiver from Baylor. Nevertheless, Baylor had some problems, and unfortunately, the football players got into trouble for sexual assault. There's massive firings, and the NCAA had to step in and take control of the situation. So that was just brutal and all that. Number 9 is Notre Dame's academic fraud. There were a lot of investigations into academic misconduct through the years involving athletes, vacated wins, penalties, and a lot of things happening. Notre Dame is the golden child with the most national championships in history, and, everyone wants to play for Notre Dame and all that, Catholic or non. It was just like, brutal and all that. So the fact of the matter was that everyone thinks Notre Dame cheats because, they do well and, they're kind of a private school in a sense. They're a Catholic school, so they think they're above the law, but I don't think so. I think it's just other shit going on and all that. Number 8 is the Cam Newton eligibility issue. There was a massive situation, and it had to do with Cam Newton. So when Cam Newton played for Auburn, he was good. Auburn was decent. He led them to a national championship in 2011, but there were allegations that his eligibility was questioned because his father actually wanted money for the commitment. Boosters sometimes pay players to join their team, but it looked like Cam's father actually wanted money so that Cam Newton could play for Auburn and all that. Newton was cleared to play. His father didn't do anything kind of wrong. And fortunately for Auburn, Cam Newton was clean. And fortunately for Carolina, especially with the Panthers and all that, and 1 year with the Pats, with his pitcher not looking pretty cool in my opinion. Number 7 is crab cakes. Crab people, crab cakes. Sorry, I had to do the South Park reference. But yeah, it's Jamarius Winston. So Winston had scrutiny over sexual assault allegations off and off-field issues. It was about university and police conduct and, him leading Florida State to a national title and almost winning the 2015 national title, but falling flat in that semifinal Rose Bowl game against Oregon, which saw Oregon put 59 up on Florida State and made them lose for the first time in 30-plus games. But the biggest problem was the whole thing with crab cakes. Allegedly, Jamarius Winston stole like a few $100s worth of crab products and all that. And that's wrong and all that. And a lot of people said, oh, it was about the money, but he didn't have enough money. All that. As a student athlete, before the NIL stuff happened, but that still was wrong. Florida State did face some conduct problems. Number 6 is Tattoo Gate from Ohio State. Ohio State in the late 2000s and early 2010s were pretty good. And, players were good. Like, you had Troy Smith, you had Ted Ginn Jr., you had, I'm saying Tony Brown, I'm wrong. Can't remember too many guys. But anyway, OSU looked pretty dang good. So anyway, players unfortunately would trade memorabilia for tattoos and cash. So basically they wanted money, they wanted tattoos, and they would just trade their stuff away. It violates NCAA rules, not just for the fact that they were getting cash. It was just because of the memorabilia and all that. There were massive suspensions, the resignation of Jim Tressel from Ohio State, and they were wandering through the wilderness for a few years. Of course, this is personal because Ohio State had the problems, and that was during the 2011 year that they won the Sugar Bowl over my Arkansas Razorbacks. And unfortunately, Ryan Mallett, RIP, was on that team. I wish that they had just given the Sugar Bowl from Ohio State back to Arkansas. It would be good. We don't win the national championship, but hey, whatever happens, don't fuck us around. Don't fuck with the hog. Number 5 is the whole SWC, Southwestern Conference. If there was one college football conference that had a lot of problems, it was the Southwestern Conference. And I know what you're saying. What the heck is the Southwest Conference? They're not in the NCAA. Well, not now, but 30 years ago they were. They actually disbanded 30 years ago because this is 2026. So the Southwest Conference had some teams. They had 9 teams. Primarily, it was what they call the Texas Conference. You had, if I can remember all the teams off the top of my head, you had Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Baylor, Rice, Houston, Southern Methodist, which we will talk about later. What was the 8th team? Houston. Well, I think it was a 19 league. Let's see. I said right. I said the 3 Texas. Oh, and Texas A&M, right? Yeah, and Texas A&M, right? No, I said that. Didn't I say? Okay, sorry. Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Baylor, Houston, SMU, Rice, and I guess Arkansas. I guess it was an 18 conference. I hate having to do stuff, but I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, Texas Christian. That's it. Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah, that had to be it. So universities and all that. Yeah, so the full members were Arkansas, Baylor, Houston, Rice. I think I said, did I say Rice? Baylor, Rice, SMU, Southern Methodist, Texas A&M. Texas Christian was the 9th one. Yeah, it was Texas Christian. Nevertheless, so those 9 schools, and Arkansas, of course. Arkansas was in. Arkansas was the outsider, the only non-Texas team in that conference. They were decent and all that. The winner of the Southwest Conference in football would always play in the Cotton Bowl when bowl tie-ins existed. Like the Rose Bowl would have the Big Ten versus the Pac-10 champion. Southwest Conference would have the SWC champion, the Southwest Conference champion against maybe an at-large, the Orange Bowl, the Big 8. Soon the Big 12 was orange, all that, yeah. But basically, all the schools minus Rice and Arkansas had one scandal to do with college football. That's right. Houston had theirs because their coach made them practice more times than was legally allowed by the system. And, there were manipulations and all that stuff. So, yeah, so every school in the Southwest Conference minus Arkansas and Rice. Well, Rice didn't really need to do the scandal because Rice were the scrawny nerds. I think Texas Christian got bit too. Yeah, I remember reading a book about it. But, yeah, the Southwest Conference was just huge. The scandals would take down the conference in essence, and teams would move from the SWC to either the Big 10, Big 8, turning the Big 12, the Mount Conference USA, or in Arkansas' case, the SEC, Southeastern Conference. Anyway, number 4 is the Miami Hurricanes booster scandals. There were 2 massive scandals with the Miami squad, so I'm going to put them both at the same time. The fact of the matter was that Miami was, if you watch ESPN 30 for 30's The U, Part 1 and 2, you'll know what I'm talking about. Kind of a refresher. But anyway, in the 80s, Miami were getting strong. They were starting to become a national football powerhouse. People didn't really think of Miami much pre-1982, but they were making it happen. Howard Schnellenberger got from the national championship in 1984 against Nebraska, who decided to go for 2 instead of kicking the extra point that would tie the game and get the national championship. I would have taken the national championship that way. But yeah, Miami soon be good, but then there would be scandals including 2 live crew Miami players, basically the taunting. If you watch the 1991 Cotton Bowl There's a video about all the penalties Miami took, which were massive, set a college football record for a bowl game. Even though Miami won the game 45-3 over Texas, it was just basically all that, and they just basically made taunting illegal because of Miami. So anyhow, that's one scandal that ruined Miami. But then in the 2000s, Nevin Shapiro would provide players with cash gifts and other benefits. Miami would be in deep trouble because, Miami had the issue. The worst part was that Nevin Shapiro kind of bribed the new Miami president. Donna, what's her name? And who cares? And you know how the Orange Bowl used to be a great stadium, and now the Marlins Stadium is built on top of it? Nevin Shapiro had something. I mean, the University of Miami kind of put that there, the Orange Bowl spot, I think for money and for improper benefits. But yeah, Miami got bit too many times. Number 3 is the Reggie Bush scandal. Now, it could easily be number 2 on this list, but because it's been kind of resolved in a sense, it gets dropped down one spot. So, Reggie Bush was this great running back for USC, and they were almost back-to-back national champs. They won the 2004 national championship. Of course, it was a little bit controversial the previous year in 2003 that they were left out of the national title game. But then they won in 2004 the Rose Bowl? No. I think they went to the Sugar Bowl. Yeah, they went to the Sugar Bowl. And that was when Ashley Simpson tried to redeem her career but failed. And then in the 2005 national title game against Texas, one of the greatest bowl games of all time, fight me on it, USC lost to Texas on 4th and 5, and Vince Young's run. Reggie Bush turned out to be a good running back in the NFL. He helped New Orleans out, and ironically, the year after everything almost went for shit for the Saints and moving to San Antonio, he led them to the NFC title game. And then in 2010, they won the Super Bowl. I don't think he was on that team, or was he? I can't remember. I know he played for Buffalo and Houston as well. But yeah, Reggie Bush was big as a good running back. Unfortunately, though, there were problems. There were a scandal involving money and Bush's family getting paid off by a booster and all that, improper benefits. And because of that, USC was stripped of 2 national titles. Bush lost his Heisman Trophy because of that. And USC stuff was tainted in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s. Bush actually fought for things, and the NCAA mishandled the whole Reggie Bush situation. After 10 years of trying, they finally gave in and gave Reggie Bush the Heisman Trophy back. And I think they kept USC from getting their 2004 national championship. I don't know if they still have that technically, but it didn't matter. Reggie Bush, and the NCAA admitted their mistake and gave Bush back his Heisman. What do you expect? Number 2 is the Jerry Sandusky problems. I know it should be number 1, but there's a reason why it's not number 1. Anyways, Jerry Sandusky, you should know about the story about child abuse and how he used his organization to prey on young kids and all that. What's even worse was the cover-up by university officials, and even Joe Paterno should have said something about Sandusky. Should have fired Sandusky, should have did something to Sandusky, but he didn't, and he paid dearly. He was forced to resign. Fans were actually hoping for Joe Paterno and all that. I actually was on Joe Paterno's side because I thought the university had mishandled the situation. But lo and behold, I was wrong as usual. But Jerry said, I never was forced Sandusky at all. He got child abuse. He got 30 to 60 years, practically what they call for life, because Sandusky was 60 plus years old. And it basically set the standard for schools and for people that these abuse allegations are stupid. And Jerry Sandusky ruined Penn State. It was like Penn State had stuff stripped away from them, but I think the NCAA fixed it and changed it. And people were upset. And number 1 is the death penalty, SMU 1987, the only NCAA football school to get that penalty. So SMU were a decent team in the early 80s. They were nationally ranked. They were winning Cotton Bowls. Eric Dickerson, Craig James, the Pony Express running backs, Lance McElhaney, the quarterback. SMU had a decent defense too. SMU were looking good. They even played their home games at Texas Stadium where the Cowboys played. So SMU was riding high, and then there were massive scandals and all that. Of course, this is another one of those ESPN 30 for 30s called Pony XS with dollar signs on the S's in excess. Basically, boosters were paying these athletes and all that. The NCAA stepped in saying, stop that right now. And, they had to stop. But in 1985, there was a allegation by a player. I can't remember his name for the life of me. David Clemens or something? No, David Williams? I don't know. He was a linebacker. He blew the whistle. He was actually kicked out of SMU and all that. And I think that was what led him to try to yell at the SMU officials that he was being paid and all that. And his parents said they took the money because, they were dirt poor and all that. Makes sense. And worst of all, the governor of Texas, Bill Clemens, actually was part of SMU for a while as their director. So basically, it was a conflict of interest and all that. So he basically was questioned about it because he was part of SMU and everything else. The SMU president kind of said that they had to keep the payments going because of the fact that if they shortchanged the athlete who had that, they would be in trouble because he would blow the whistle. Well, you're in trouble anyway. The SMU president was presented with a envelope that he allegedly sent the linebacker's family. And he basically said, no, this is not my signature and all that. They actually did a big Channel 8 investigation and all that down in Texas. And they actually said that if the SMU president was clearly saying these stuff like, oh, it's just an insurance form or something about that, basically it could have ruined the investigation. But he basically flat out lied. A handwriting expert basically said that it was the SMU president's stuff. And that was big. So February 28th, was it? Or was it 27th, 1987, the NCAA came to Dallas to talk to SMU officials, and they made a massive move. The NCAA, for the first time, would issue the death penalty, meaning that SMU could not play football in 1987. They would be allowed to play a reduced schedule in 1988. So basically, all the scholarships were gone and all that. So, yeah, that was huge. Well, SMU's schedule would have been like pre-made in 1988 to punish them. So SMU decided, despite losing the 1987 season, they would actually cancel the 1988 season on their own accord and all that. There was massive repeated violations, and people tried to justify their situation by saying that we had to pay these guys to shut them up. Well, you were fucked no matter what. So in essence, the investigator actually fainted after the press conference. So SMU were out of luck in 87 and 88. But the NCAA decided they couldn't really punish the students, the football players and all that. So they made a rule that any school could pick up an SMU player and all that without the penalty of having to lose a year because you switch colleges. Once you transfer schools, you have to sit out a year and all that. That's what the old school was before the stupid NIL rules, and they spoiled athletes like that UNLV quarterback after he was 3-0 decided to quit because he didn't get enough money. And Nico Imaliva fucking left Tennessee for UCLA because he didn't get paid. Now we got very spoiled, pampered student athletes and all that. And that's bullshit. Utter bullshit. I know technically this should have been a top 10 too with the NIL. But, the full scope hasn't been hit yet. But yeah, so the SMU people got to move and all that with no penalty. SMU in 1989 would field a 9-team school. They could not play any team outside Texas. Everyone in that SMU team basically were freshmen. They did get Forrest Gregg, a former SMU player and Super Bowl champ with the Packers, to be the head coach, and he helped out. SMU took a while. It took, till 2007 to get a winning season or something, or a bowl game. But yeah, SMU is kind of back. They were decent in the 2024-25 season. But yeah, SMU hasn't really committed and been there. That's what I'm saying. Anyhow, Jeff, I'm going to do.